Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. Ji Xiaojun, Charlotte and Juling again. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, and I guess you'll be very interested. Your favorite. Let's talk about how do Chinese people eat?
Not
really. No. About meals, about, what do we do, what do we not do, actually? Because both of you have been living in China for long enough.
Time.
Long enough.
Yeah.
You know what I still do that is very inappropriate on a table? My girlfriend tells me that like once in a while she has to remind me. Very often I use my chopsticks and without even paying attention to it, I point the chopsticks towards the person.
Yeah, you never talk with your chopsticks.
And sometimes I don't realize it because I didn't.
It's kind of rude.
But we're not supposed to do that with forks and knives.
No.
Right?
But the thing is that when you... It's easier, but it's easier. Now think about it. The way you have the chopsticks in your hand, it's much easier to point them towards the person in front of you than to point the forks and knives.
Chopsticks to help
because the fork and knife naturally will have them like this and not like this.
Before we go on to the details, let's take a look at some footages we have prepared just to show you the difference of a Chinese environment. This is in a Chinese restaurant.
Very typical scene you might see.
Yeah, we would stand up to make a toast.
And you have the lazy Susan in the middle and all the dishes.
And this is how they serve dumplings.
Oh, I'm hungry.
Well, we say the Western style food,
Western style Chinese restaurants. It's still Chinese.
Looks quite Western to me.
Yeah, this is very Western.
Just different ways of serving.
Little
different environment, different ways of cooking, and different levels of noise in the restaurant.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
This brings back to my favorite word, 热闹, heat and noise.
Heat and noise.
I mean, you find lots of Chinese restaurants are really loud and bustling, and the more people, the better. And people will actually pick out restaurants
based on that.
And they'll wait. They don't mind waiting.
You know what? I do the contrary. I very often, not every time, because sometimes it's a bad sign, but very often I will choose a very calm, very, restaurant with not too many people, because what I have noticed over the years is that, what I was saying in Chinese, 店大欺客, like the bigger the store, the less they take care of customers. So what happens, it happens in China, it happens everywhere. If a store is really, really big, the service is not that good. The food is not that good. They are so famous that they can afford to use lesser ingredients, and people won't notice it because the whole psychology is, we're still in the best restaurant. And whereas in another kind of restaurant which business is not that good, they will take much better care of you because they feel the need of it.
But if the business is not that good, there has to be a reason behind it.
So, yeah.
I agree with you, Charlotte. If we go to a restaurant and the waitresses will lead you to the table by the window because they want these tables to be occupied first, so just to give an impression of the people coming next.
The atmosphere
to give
of
the impression this is a
restaurant.
crowded restaurant.
Yes, and it's full of heat and noise.
That's right. If we're talking about the Western style restaurant, it might be a little bit different.
Well, I think the same logic applies. The more people in a restaurant, you probably, the better the restaurant is, food or something about it means that it's good. But again, I think, and it depends on why you're going out for dinner, but I think oftentimes, in America at least, we might look for a place that's not as 热闹, and noisy.
But it depends what kind of restaurant you're looking for. If you go to Buffalo Grill, you like, or any kind of, steakhouse, and it's different. It's more about having a lot of people.
There's also one thing that I've noticed, which I think is very interesting. Chinese restaurants tend to be very eye-catchy. They tend to have their names made in the big size.
Out of gold.
With neons.
But sometimes... I don't know, in America or in Europe, I've also seen restaurants and kind of a tiny entrance and
it's all about the good food. If you talk about real restaurants,
we're not saying the Chinese restaurants, their food is not good.
No, not at all. But in Europe, it's simpler. It's more about take care of the food. do something that is tasty but not too, because in China also there's, as you say, 热闹, it's heat and noise. It's all about this. So the whole concept is to have, you know, big things, big signs, obvious things. But it depends what kind of restaurant it is. So if you have to compare what's comparable. If you compare a very people-oriented restaurant in China, you have to compare it to the same kind of restaurant in the West.
But I do think on average you see much more of a bustling sort of restaurant atmosphere.
The air is always like
yes,
that.
The atmosphere here generally
sure.
than you do in the States or even Europe.
Yeah, having said that, I still have to say we do have some quiet restaurants.
Of course,
Chinese
you do have. Well, if you go in,
just different styles.
Western restaurant, 5-star hotels to begin with, obviously, but this is kind of high standard restaurant. And if you go to France, I mean, I just went to, I took my girlfriend to a restaurant, a 3-star restaurant. It's the Michelin 3-star, so it's worldwide recognized. The restaurant is very small. It was actually, they had a few very online magazines that do this kind of ratings of restaurant in the whole world. It was number 11 last year in the whole world, and it's very, very well recognized.
Yeah.
And this one, we had to book a table a month before. And with 2 weeks left, I called the restaurant saying, well, I would like to add one person. They said, well, we're sorry.
Can't do it.
We can't do that.
I was just going to say, along with the whole heat and noise atmosphere, you know, festive atmosphere in Chinese restaurants, the other interesting thing is you have individual rooms, 包厢, where people will go. And that's interesting because
they want some privacy.
They want some privacy. But yet within these individual rooms,
could be noisy.
It could be very noisy.
But this is our own world.
But
this is an independent world.
It's our group.
Yeah.
It's not the entire restaurant.
But, I mean, as I said, we do have some quiet places. And one type of restaurants which might be new is the old mansions, old residential areas turned into restaurants.
What they call 私房菜.
The private menu, I don't know, how do you call it?
Well, actually, you know, I went to one of these ones, you know, the Peking Opera, the biggest name of Mei Lanfang.
Yeah.
And his family actually opened a place, and if you don't know anybody in there,
it's not a restaurant.
No, it's not that. It is a restaurant, but if you don't know anyone personally, you can't get in.
Wow.
You can't go there and say, I would like to book for, even if they have seats.
So if I go there and say, well, I know Julianne, you have to
No, but I can tell you, I can tell you whose name you have to mention, not mine, but somebody else.
You're not going to mention it on the show.
No.
Exactly.
Obviously not. Now, enough about the exterior. Let's go inside a restaurant, and because what we've noticed is, you know, the settings of tables are also very different in a restaurant, in a Western restaurant and the Chinese restaurant.
Well, and same problem. If it's a real traditional European style restaurant, of course, well, it depends how many courses you have. Traditionally, you will have 2 or 3 sets of forks and knives, different types for how do you say, first courses? First courses. We call that entries in French, appetizers. You have smaller forks, smaller knives. Then you will have different forms of fork and knives for the fish, for example. And so you have
it's
at least
very particular. Chopsticks are much easier.
Yeah.
I'm a chopstick fan.
You're a chopstick, well, it depends what you eat.
Oh, I'm a chopstick fan.
And the way we serve food is also different. I mean, in your restaurants, you might, you know, each one has your own share of food.
Absolutely.
But basically, yeah, I mean, we also borrowed that pattern in some restaurants. But basically, in most restaurants in China, we still put all the food in the middle of the table. You just take what you want.
I love it. You know what I love about Chinese tables? First of all is that you have everything in the middle. I'm still for, you know, separating the first courses and the main courses, just not putting everything without order. But the good thing is that it's very convivial, and also everyone is around a round table so that everyone can talk to everyone. But in the Western tables, it's a nightmare sometimes because I would love to talk with Charlotte, who's on the other side of the very long table, and I have to sit aside you, and I don't want to talk to you. That's a big problem.
And you know, just
move your place.
just practically speaking, another nice thing about a round table and having the dishes in the middle, especially if you have a lazy Susan, is that you can eat what you want to eat.
Right.
And
you don't have to pass.
If you order one dish you don't like, you're not just stuck with it, having to eat it, even though you don't like it.
It's a nightmare when you go to a new restaurant you don't know.
Yes.
In the West.
Yes.
And you know, every
You're
time I bring Chinese people to France, or I eat with Chinese people, it's really funny because what we do is that we convert everyone, even the French friends around the table, to the Chinese way, which is
share.
We order with that in mind. Say, okay, we're going to try a little bit of everything and share between everyone.
You mean in a Chinese restaurant?
No, in a European
Western
restaurant.
Restaurants.
Wow. And the waitresses are amused by this.
Italians will have family style. What we call this sort of family style, where you just sort of take what you want and it's all in the middle. Italians have that tradition. There are restaurants in New York, in Little Italy, which are run by, you know, Italians from Italy.
Italians.
And it's, you order for your whole table. It's not just, well, I'll have this and you'll have that and that looks good and I don't like mine, and and you share.
You know, another problem I have a lot. I eat very slowly.
Uh-oh.
And I talk a lot.
Yes.
And if you combine those two, thanks for agreeing on that one. And if
You're staying silent. That's smart.
And to be safe, you want to have your own share of food.
Well, and that's the problem, because in France, it's the way they bring the courses is that you have everyone around the table has to finish this one in order to bring the next one. And sometimes
because everyone has to finish before the next one will come up.
Exactly. So the main problem is that sometimes they can't even pre-make the next one. They have to make it on time. So they're kind of looking at you and
you're the one causing trouble.
I'm the one causing trouble. And they look at you and say, okay, he might be over with it very soon. So only at that point they're going to go to the main chef and say, well, you can start making the dish.
Yeah, but that's mainly the problem with the chef, because they have to predict what's to happen
I don't
next.
think it is, because most Chinese friends I have a lot of trouble spending 3 hours around a table for just one meal. Whereas we love to chat.
You guys are notorious for spending long time.
You talk
French
too
people.
much.
Meals.
French people, oh yeah, we love talking.
Long, leisurely meals.
But we in Chinese restaurants, we have our own problems. And, well, I would say we have our own concerns. And something you shouldn't do on the table. Say, in serving dishes, in serving food, certain things you have to follow some rules.
Some protocol.
Exactly. Like if you are serving a fish, you never actually turn the head or the tail to the main host or the guest.
Right.
It's something you would consider as improper.
Really?
Or rude.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Do you have anything like this?
No, but I just remember just the way my girlfriend is
telling
me
you
not to orient the chopsticks or something else.
Or the other thing is sticking your chopsticks straight up in your rice bowl.
In your rice, yeah, I do the same thing too. I do everything that is.
Because they have a reason behind it. Because it looks a picture like it's
stabbing?
Incense.
No, burning incense.
Burning incense. It only appears in funerals, and this is obviously not something you should do. And
you don't make a meal.
You don't make a noise with your chopsticks.
Well, no. It's not implying that it's your last meal. It's implying that the person sitting opposite you is having their last meal.
And then I point the chopsticks at the person.
Big issue.
And it's even worse.
And you never actually, especially in seaside cities, you never turn a fish over.
That's right. You kind of have
you can't say it like that either. You have
a
certain way of.
You don't do it. You just take away the bones, once you're done with the upper side.
Speaking of fish, though, it is okay in many situations, obviously not very fancy restaurants, but in many situations, many restaurants, to put your fish bones straight onto the table.
Yes, which is impossible in France.
You would never do in a Western restaurant.
Very
ever.
rude. You have to put them on the border of on the side of the plate.
This also brings up an interesting point, because Chinese plates, if you have a plate with your meal, if you have a plate, it's very small.
It's very small.
Otherwise, you have a bowl, and it might have rice or whatever. So where are you going to put your bones?
And the waiters and the waitresses come actually, this is a good thing, actually, because the waiter or the waitresses in Chinese restaurants actually come every, let's say, 20 minutes to change the plate, to replace the plate. And it happens to me all the time that I'm a very greedy person, so I want to grab a piece of this and I put it in my plate, and then I haven't even eaten that yet, and I see another one that I want to eat and put it in.
I know what you're doing. Because you're talking too much.
Okay. So what happens is that they come over.
You just saved your own share of food.
Exactly. And I want to eat, and I want to eat all that, and they come over. Sometimes I don't pay attention. I'm talking again to somebody else, and they take the plate away. And I'm like, no, I didn't eat that. Bring that back to me.
They've just seen your trick.
Oh, another thing you were asking me about other things you don't do. I remember about the teapot too. You can't actually orientate the
mouth.
You say the mouth, or
is it?
The spout.
The spout of the teapot. The teapot towards anyone actually.
But I mean, in different places, and they have different rules, different protocols. Because this is especially true in the southern part of China, because actually they also have certain ways to ask the waitress to come over to add some more hot water. Just put the lid on the top of the teapot.
Yes, just
because the tradition with Chinese meals is you have a pot of tea that's on the table, and you drink tea while you eat.
That's true.
So you're constantly running out of water, and you can add more water.
Well, you drink tea, I drink baijiu.
Okay. But talking about tea, I mean, when someone is serving you tea, you have to, do this.
Yes.
To show your appreciation.
That's thank you.
Do we all have the same story about that thing?
About the emperor?
The emperor?
You want to tell it?
The story.
Well, I don't know if my English is good enough for it. But anyway, it's about, I think it was in the Qing dynasty, about Qianlong emperor. This is what I heard. And the emperors back then, they liked to actually go into the society disguised as an average person, and with the ministers also accompanying them, just to see how the outside world really was. Because they're inside the palace, so they might, they have to know really how it is. So I remember once, he actually, since he was disguised as a normal person, he poured some tea for one of his ministers. And of course, the emperor doing that, normally, the minister would have to say that, you have to get down on the knees and say, 10,000 years, 10,000 years, 10,000 years, my emperor, something like that. So he couldn't say that because otherwise everyone would know this is the emperor.
In disguise.
So he found a way with the fingers to give the image of somebody being on his knees and doing this. So I think it was supposed to be like this.
Yeah, that is obviously that story. I mean, but there is another story about whether you should do it with 2 fingers or 1 finger.
Why is that?
In 2 fingers, that means you're married. In 1 finger, that means you're still single. I don't know. Somehow I was told the story like that.
So do you have to do that with the ring finger? Or?
I don't know, but it's just good to know. But there is also one aspect that I want to mention about, dinners, about serving, and that is seating. It's important. And who sits where.
Sometimes I make mistakes because when you enter a room, the seat that is the most inside is supposed to be the seat of the most important person.
Well, actually, the seat facing the door is the most important seat.
Yes, but some restaurants...
Isn't that because the person who sits facing the door is the one that's going to pay?
No. No, if it's, well, kind of. But if it's sometimes...
it might be someone else who is paying, but he's the most important
guest of honor.
He's the host.
Exactly. If it's the biggest guest, they want to put him... And usually the biggest guest also is going to be very polite. No, I can't sit here, and is going to leave the, And sometimes I do the joke of saying, okay, I can sit here, I will pay.
I mean, sometimes you can just judge by the shape of the napkins, because,
Yes, because that's a wonderful thing about Chinese restaurants. I love it. They'll fold the napkins into all sorts of various flower designs and bird designs, like origami, paper folding. And it's beautiful. And like what you were saying, if you have 10 settings at a table, 9 napkins will be the same, folded the same way.
Or the color will be different.
Or the color. And then that seat of honor will have a different fold.
Yeah, that leads to another question. Which seat is second most important?
The next, either right or left to the most important one. Right.
Yeah,
to the most important one.
if this is the say, main host seat.
Julianne would be
this will
the
be
second
the main
most
guest.
important.
The one right.
And there is a seat for the second host.
Second host.
The one on the opposite side.
On the opposite of the
So
the main
am I
host.
like the lowest if I'm to your left?
No, it really depends. It really depends.
You're my girlfriend.
Because it seems like in your culture, this is the second important people, right? Second important guest. And it really depends on
Gosh, I don't
it really depends on how many people are the important hosts. And
Exactly.
there are two.
Yes.
You are the most important guest. And the second most important guest will be seated, next to the second most important host.
That's very complicated.
This
It is
very
complicated.
complicated. We actually, because typically we have square or rectangular tables.
Okay.
And with rectangular tables, it's the people that sit at the head
Yeah,
of the
the head,
table.
like the narrow side with
Like,
only
that's
one person.
the chairman's,
That's the
chairman's seat.
Chairman's seat.
Yeah. Like if you were having dinner at home and you had guests at home, probably the
But I guess that's the most
host.
crowded place.
yeah, the two hosts would sit at the ends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
It's easy to
what
get
happens.
out.
'Cause it matters, the seating also matters in serving food. And the waiters, they will serve starting from the main guest.
That's right.
And then if it is a round table, it will be first, second, and it goes this way.
And if they're not serving individual plates, they'll put the dish onto the Lazy Susan. They'll spin, the waitress will spin the Lazy Susan so that the dish is in front of either the guest of honor or the host. And then you guys will have to eat it or take a bite before anyone else will start to move the Lazy Susan.
So basically what happens is that there's the main person sitting at the number one seat, who is very usually, commonly the host of the meal.
Yes.
So the waiter is or waitress is gonna turn the Lazy Susan.
Yes.
That's right.
With the newly arrived dish.
Yep.
To the main person, who usually is gonna turn it over to the number one guest who is next to him.
And
Yes,
then
just to
say,
show the
"Chur, chur, chur,
politeness."
eat.
Yeah.
And at that moment, usually my chopsticks are there, and I'm waiting eagerly.
No, you
That's
can't.
because you're shameless.
No. Well, officially, I don't know. I mean, if you are not allowed to start until the main guest or main host have started.
Same thing everywhere. In France, there's this tradition that usually, women were cooking at home more often than men. So we have this sentence actually saying that the mistress of the home, it's mistress, which means like, I don't know if it sounds the same in English.
Yeah,
okay.
you can say that.
Okay. So the mistress of the home has to sit and start eating before anyone dares starting. Because she's over there preparing the rest of the dishes, waiting for everything to be... And it's easy when everything is already here to start. But everyone, in France, everywhere you go, it's going to be like this. Everyone's going to... If you're at somebody's house, it's going to be like this. We are waiting for the mistress.
For everyone to be seated around the table.
No, for the cook, the mistress of the home, who's usually cooking for everyone, for her to have finished everything, come here, sit here, and start eating.
And that's interesting because I've been to a lot of my Chinese friends' houses, and oftentimes the person who's cooking, be it the mistress of the house or the man of the house, they will be cooking throughout the meal, and everyone else will be eating, and they'll come in with a new dish, and they'll put it on the table, and maybe they'll have a few bites, and then they'll go back to the kitchen and keep cooking.
Talking about because just now we were talking about the protocols in big restaurants, the official meals with the main host and main guest thing. But if we go to, a average person's home, and if we are talking about that in some rural areas, and the protocols are different. But one thing that we do share actually in many places is that, there is supposedly the head of the family. In many cases, it will be like the father. And sometimes they are working outside. You have to wait. The whole family has to wait until the father comes back and start eating, and everyone else will stop.
Yes, that's another form of tradition. So it's even more man-oriented than what we have in France.
Yeah,
it's just like
a lot of
kind of
times.
respect for the woman.
And there is also, there is also the tradition in some areas that I've heard about. It might not be intriguing to you, Charlotte, because basically it's only men who are allowed to sit around the table.
Yeah.
While women are they're only supposed to eat in the kitchen. Sometimes that does happen.
Oh, I mean, I think other cultures around the world that also have that kind of, you know,
there's
eating tradition.
But if you go back to the restaurants, and if you're treating someone, and how do you show your hospitality?
I buy more alcohol. No.
In the West?
No, in the West.
Yeah?
Oh, well, the thing is, I've been in China doing that all the time. I don't really do that in the West. And especially in the West, actually, people always want to share with you.
I know. If you're not on a date or anything, you know, the way you show your hospitality is to have someone over to your house.
Yeah.
You're prepared.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep,
You prepare a meal
it's to have
in your
them
house.
to your home. That's quite a hospitable, warm gesture.
And especially, you know, what we do in China usually when I want to show how, you know, how I want all those people to be here and everything. Well, I was half joking when I was saying I would buy more alcohol, but it's kind of the idea, you know, of in China, that's it. There's a lot of waste involved here, but we try still to, you know, make sure that everyone eats enough, has enough variety in the dishes, and has enough to drink, and whatever you want. You try to show that off just to be sure that you take care of everyone. Whereas in the West, if you want to do too much of that, people are going to be embarrassed and saying, you don't have to do that much.
Be comfortable, yeah.
They won't be comfortable. And
what happens in China is whatever you say, that you don't have to do that much, you don't have to be that kind.
Or be
but
that
again,
polite.
to be a host, he has to worry about all these.
In China, usually what happens is that they say, you want some more rice? No, I'm fine. And they're going to bring you some more rice anyway.
Just make sure you are really, really fine.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's an interesting point when you are eating at people's homes. I remember when I was in France, I was eating so much that all the home mistresses, this is still the French term, they loved me because I would finish everything. So there was nothing left.
But if you do that in China, you might be in trouble.
Insulting your host.
No. If you're done, if you're finished with anything, they would just
bring something else.
Give you more.
Because Chinese people
They
never
will just bring
believe.
you more, yeah.
Chinese people never believe if you finish everything that's in your plate. They never believe that you're not hungry anymore. As soon as you finish everything on the table, Chinese people think, oh.